This particular exhibition is based on really what was initially a study about women and war, which was being conducted by the International Committee of the Red Cross, and commissioned a set of photographs on individuals as well as documentary films to show the different effects of what can happen to women in war. What was important was that it should all focus on women's stories, that no single country or conflict should be, as it were, targeted. And the idea was to make it as kind of global, that these were issues that could affect women wherever conflict exists.
I want to get married. I really would like to get married. But I'm afraid that if I'm married, the man will leave me for another woman, because I will not be able to do a lot of things for my husband. You should be able to cook and take care of your husband. I can't do these things because I don't have hands.
When we first heard Mariatu's story, I mean, it was so difficult to see this young woman who'd been mutilated, who'd had her hands cut off. I think in her society, the most important thing that you can do is have a family. And she realized the stark reality was that she wouldn't be able to cook properly for them. How could she raise a family? And I think this overwhelming sadness was terrible.
I was 13. I didn't know anything about the war. I was coming from the farm, trying to go to a house when we were attacked. I begged them for a long time not to cut my hands. I said, kill me rather than cut my hands.
The remarkable thing is then, 10 years later, finding in completely different circumstances, living in Canada, bright, young, attractive woman who also with remarkable independence, doing her own shopping, didn't want me to help her carry her shopping bag. She wanted to cook me a traditional Sierra Leonean meal on the phone, using the computer, putting on makeup. And even more remarkable, because I've kept in touch with her since, she's now a mother. So not only has she overcome, I think, this terrible tragedy to a certain extent, but I think more importantly, she's now founded a family and wants to become a social worker to go back and help girls and women who've been abused back in Sierra Leone. I think for many, what I do is important, because they're speaking for the larger picture. And personally, I'm trying to also convey that. I think that's why for me it's also very important that I focus on the individual. I think numbers go above people's heads, because if I said to you, 3,000 people were mutilated in this particular location, I don't think it has the power of saying Mariatu has lost her childhood and her adolescence. Sierra Leone is a country at peace, like some of the other countries that I had the opportunity to photograph in. But unfortunately for some of these women, maybe the war has ended because the bullets have stopped flying. But for them, the war hasn't ended because they're stigmatized. They've been victims once.
By the time I was 15, a man had already proposed to me. I loved him. He was a diamond digger and respected my family. I loved him for that. We were preparing for the marriage when the war started. The man I was going to marry was captured and killed.
Sarah can't go back to her home because of the terrible injustice that happened to her. She had been abused, she'd been used as a sexual slave. Many of the young girls who were raped, they would abandon their babies. She was coming to terms, loved her daughter, beautiful young daughter that she obviously didn't want to abandon, trying to bring her up in difficult circumstances.
Some women who had been raped left their babies behind in the bush, but I took Khadija with me. God gave me this child. She is innocent. After the war, I was taken to an Italian organization who looked after girls with young babies. We talked to doctors about what had happened to us. They found us a place to live and gave us food for 3 months. Now I am training to be a hairdresser.
So I shot all the pictures in 2001 in black and white, which is my preference. I think black and white imagery really focuses your mind on the story, on the individual. And then when I decided to go back, I thought about it and I thought I wanted to show the passage of time. And I was worried, not knowing what I was going to find, that if I did another set of black and white pictures, it might look very similar. And so to show the passage of time, I thought, no, now I'm going to shoot in color. And I think it was a way of making that passage of time quite clear.
My name is Mabibi. I don't know myself, but people told me I'm 10. One of my brothers is 5 and the other is 7. I take care of them.
Remarkably, one of the most powerful stories was actually a young girl, I would say a woman almost, because she had all of those duties, Mabibi in Afghanistan. She pushed her way through this kind of massive crowd of men who had gathered around this ICRC vehicle because they wanted food distribution. The first I knew of her, she was tugging on my shirt and telling me her story. I understand a bit of Dari. The story seemed just incredible. She was on her own. They wouldn't let her sign up to the food distribution because she was a minor. How could she be a head of family? And she said, I'm looking after 2 younger brothers. I'm living in a tent that I've stitched together with rags. I have no food, I have no water, I have no spare clothes, I have nothing. And so I said to her, okay, well, show me, where you're living. And again, very unusually for Afghanistan, she grabbed my hand and she pushed her way back through the crowd of men. And we walked for about 15 minutes and we arrived at this tent in the desert, and there were the 2 younger brothers sheltering from the bright midday sun, and the story was absolutely as she had described it.
I do not remember when my mother died. I was told my mother died in childbirth, and it is 4 years since I lost my father.
Again, like so many of the other women, I thought, what has happened to Mabibi? And I've been back to the area 4 times. I've never managed to locate her. I've had the governor of the province help. I've had charities, local Afghan charities. I've had the Afghan Red Crescent, who actually, they found the village. She'd got married, so probably married around the age of 12 or 13, not totally unusual in Afghanistan, and that she had died. Reasons unknown.
I am working as a staff nurse at the governmental hospital. I have to walk 20 minutes every day in order to reach my hospital. There is soldiers everywhere.
I think when I met the women, strong, powerful individuals who were resisting what was being thrown at them. And in Shehnaz's case, that was truly physical. I mean, she was living in a home that belonged to her ancestors, father, grandfather, and this home was being pelted by settlers. And she said, you know, we're resisting. And the extraordinary thing was that here's a Palestinian woman that occasionally had to be protected by Israeli soldiers from settlers.
Our neighbors, they want this house. They throw stones. They try to do everything in order to get us out of it. They throw 3 Molotov cocktails here to the house, and they shot with gun. If you want to look to the sky, you feel that you are in a prison.
When I left her in 2001, you know, we've always been here, we'll remain here. But sadly, 10 years later, that wasn't the case. They had been pushed out. It was a no man's land. And, you know, I did want to go back. And through the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, we did get permission from the Israeli Defense Force. And we were told, right, you know, you can go back to the home. And what was rather remarkable was that in the end, yet again, we had to be protected by the Israeli Defense Forces because the settlers were actually trying to attack us as we wanted to move forward to go to our home. I think for most of the women, they were speaking in many cases because of their loved ones and also because of their community. I think that they understood that, you know, what had happened to them was also representative of what happened elsewhere. Nasrin in Afghanistan, she never quite understood why I was so interested in her story. And when I took the book back, she opened it, she was suddenly someone, you know. She in Afghanistan, women are treated, you know, they're almost not citizens. I think she understood why I was doing what I was doing. I think revisiting the women was emotionally quite something well, certainly it was for me, but I think, you know, I was often hugged and, you know, meals were cooked, and I don't think they ever expected to see me again. In 2001, I don't think I really ever expected to see them either. And yeah, I've since managed to stay in touch with half of the women that I refound. Ultimately, these women are survivors. And I think it's really, really important. When we think of heroes, valor, we think of men. They're often awarded medals, but actually the medals should go to the women. They're the true heroes. They didn't flee their countries. They, more often than not, stayed home and did their best for their families under really exceptional, extraordinary circumstances.